Hello everyone, my name is Justine Wild and I am the LGBTQ2S plus subcommittee chair for Rotary District 5360 Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Committee. I hope you're doing well and I hope you're excited. This is our Pride Week. So for this week, Monday to Friday, we are going to be having a video talking about Pride and the LGBTQ2S plus community. Let's just hop into it. So if we have not met and you do not know, my name is Justine and I identify as a bisexual woman. I have been out and proud in our community for over a year now, and I'm so happy and honored and thrilled to be able to share my story and to help educate all of you on your diversity, equity, and inclusion community or journey. And I'm going to help walk you through what we call LGBTQ2 101. So yeah, let's just talk a little bit about our schedule, and this is subject to change. If there's anything that you would like to talk about that isn't in the agenda, we can definitely make time to talk about that sometime this week. So today I want to cover the history of Pride, so that includes the Stonewall Riots, as well as the accepted acronyms, all that good stuff about LGBTQ. Is it LGBTQ? Is it LGBTIA? 2? What do all these things mean? How best to use it? All that good stuff we will cover today. And then later this week, so Tuesday, which is tomorrow, we will talk about sexualities, and in particular, gay, lesbian, and bisexual identities. What do they mean? Words not to use, words to use, all that good stuff. On Wednesday, we will dive into transgender and trans identities. On Thursday, we will finish up the rest of the acronym. So what does Q mean? Queer, 2S, Two-Spirit, plus what are some other identities you might hear of, and including we will talk about I for intersex and A for asexuality. And then on Friday, we're going to kind of wrap it all up, and I'll address any questions that might have come up during this series, but mostly I want to tackle how to be an ally to the LGBTQ2 plus community, how to help people who are coming out, how to build an inclusive culture, all of that good stuff. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the Stonewall Riots. What were they? Why are they important to us now? All that good stuff. So every year, at least in Canada and the United States, we celebrate Pride Month, which always occurs in June. And the reason that it occurs in June is because of the Stonewall Riots that happened in 1969. So essentially what happened, back in the 60s, police raids on gay bars were very common. And this forced a lot of gay bars to go underground, so you had to know someone who worked there, know someone who went there, you had to know a password, or the police would accept a bribe, and quite often all three of these things were true simultaneously, as in the Stonewall Inn. So Stonewall Inn was located in Greenwich Village in Manhattan, and it was a place where a lot of marginalized communities could come to, but primarily transgendered communities, butch lesbians, and gay men would often congregate here. So on June 28th at about 2 a.m., a police raid occurred at Stonewall. So the police came in, and how these raids would sort of happen is that everyone in the establishment would line up, and they would request IDs from everyone, and then anyone who looked like, presented like, or anything like that, anyone who presented as female or as a woman would be taken to the back by a female police officer and have their genitalia checked. If they presented as a woman but had male genitalia, they would be immediately arrested. On this night of Stonewall, the women there refused to go into the back, and the men in the line refused to give their IDs, and the situation quickly turned violent. So there was destruction of property, police cars, members or the patrons were injured, the owners were injured, police were injured, and the riot was really a buildup of all of these homophobic and transphobic policies in New York, in the United States, in the world. Everything had just sort of come to a boiling point. And that is how these riots started. It was, a fight, and then a protest, and then it led up to this level of being a riot. So the situation began to escalate through the night of June 28th. And then when the news broke in the morning, largely by the Village Voice, the protest grew exponentially. So it grew throughout the day of the 28th, and it sort of tapered off around 4 a.m. On June 29th. So while the riot effectively ended on June 29th, the effects of the riot can be felt even today. Without Stonewall, we would not have gotten to where we are as quickly as we have. So it is really important, as members of the LGBTQ community, as allies, to recognize the importance of these violent protests. And while this might be a very difficult time to be having this conversation, at the end of the day, I would not be here without the violence and without the riots that occurred at Stonewall in 1969. As well, the LGBTQ community and the ally community needs to recognize that this riot and Stonewall in general was largely instigated by queer women of color, queer and trans women of color. So Stormé DeLarverie, Sylvia Rivera, and Marsha P. Johnson are often credited as the three leaders of Stonewall. Obviously, anyone who took part is obviously credited with, doing a good thing. However, as a community, as a society, we often overlook the contributions of queer people of color and trans women of color as well. So it is very important to recognize that without these women, we would not be where we are today. Okay, so now that we've gone through why Pride, what is Pride, how did it start, let's talk a little bit about the acronym. So this is often a point of contention, not only within the LGBTQ community, but outside. It can feel a little bit like there's so many different letters and it changes all the time, and how are you supposed to keep up? What are all these identities? So I really want to break it down and make it as clear as possible, the best phrasing to use, all that good stuff, and we'll cover more of that throughout this week. But let's start with the acronym. So the acronym was originally LGBT. So this was created about the mid-80s, and it was a way for the community to take back the narrative rather than just being referred to as the gay community. It was, we are lesbian, gay, bisexual, and transgender. And at the time, that was a good acronym. It was a good first step. However, in the mid-90s, we saw the addition of the Q and the addition sign, so it became LGBTQ or LGBTQ+. Essentially what that did, Q stands for queer or questioning, and the plus is really there to include anyone who feels that they don't fit into any of these letters. So if you identify as something that is not present in LGBTQ, that plus is to really signify that we see you and you're a member of our community. So LGBTQ or LGBTQ plus is the most accepted and widely used acronym. In 2016, GLAAD, which is formerly the Gay Lesbian Alliance Against Defamation, has said that LGBTQ is the most widely, or should be the most used acronym. And then we'll come back to that. We'll have a little bit of a conversation about what that means exactly. Another acronym that you'll see, usually in American contexts, from my knowledge, is LGBTQIA. So I stands for intersex, A stands for asexuality. Put the plus again at the end to include anyone who might be missing from that grouping. However, in Canada, and I would encourage anyone in the US as well, we have an acronym. Obviously, I've been using it, and that is LGBTQ2S+, or LGBTQ2+. 2 and 2S stand for Two-Spirit, and in my opinion, and in a lot of organizations and activist opinions, we need to acknowledge our Indigenous communities and their identities, which would fall under Two-Spirit. You might even hear indigiqueer, which can sometimes be the meaning of the I, sometimes not. We'll talk about that on Thursday as well. But so in Canada and in the US, I would really encourage you to use the acronym LGBTQ2S+, to really acknowledge our Indigenous community. So I want to take it back to LGBTQ. This is a really great acronym for talking about the community cross-border. So if we're trying to talk about anyone who identifies as lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, queer, any of the other letters in another country or in groups of countries, LGBTQ+ is the best acronym to use because it is very deliberately big. So it encompasses any identities that might come through in specific cultures, and it's just a universal acronym that we can see used all over the world. So that's usually a good context to use that specific acronym in. As well, if you're ever in a situation where for some reason you need to tell someone about someone else's identity and you don't know what their sexuality or gender identity is, you can always say that you're a member of the LGBTQ community, and leave it at that. So at the end of the day, if your intentions are good, if you're making an effort to use the acronym, that is great. You're already taking a first step. No one expects you to be perfect right away. You don't have to beat yourself up if you keep saying LGBT instead of Q, or if you keep missing the 2S. It's all about progress and, continually working. I make mistakes. Everyone makes mistakes, whether you're in the community or whether you're not. So just be open to learning, correction, all of that good stuff. And that is all I have for you today. I hope everything is clear. Obviously, if anything isn't, if you want to have a further conversation, please leave me a comment, send us a message on our social media, send us an email. As well, if there's any topics that you want to cover that I might not have thought of, or I didn't explicitly say we were going to talk about them, please feel free to, again, leave them in the comments, send them to us, and we can definitely continue to have this conversation either this week or at a later time in a different video series, or an interview, anything like that. So, again, that's all I have for you. Thank you so much for joining me. I'm so happy to be able to have this conversation with everyone. Stay safe, stay well, and I will see you tomorrow.